Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Nun lasst uns Gott, dem Herrn, which translates to, Now let us to God, the Lord. This is a pretty interesting chorale actually. It looks deceptively plain on the page, but it has some quirks about it that makes it unusual, all things considered. So we're going to hop right into the analysis and we will talk about it as we go along. So 1 sharp in the key signature, we have G major to start things off and G minor to end things. So I reckon we're in the key of G major. And we, like I said, start off with our tonic triad. Then we move to E, B, G, and G, which is E minor in root position. That's our submediant. Passing tones in the inner voices. And then we have B, D, B, and F sharp, which is B minor in root position. So already we have an unusual progression, 1, 6, and 3. 3 generally tonic functioning chords, and no real dominant, which is interesting. These passing tones, technically speaking, if you look at them with the outer voices, we have E, C, A, and G, which is A minor 7 over E, which is where 6 wants to go. This would be a 2-4-3 chord, but I don't really think it contributes too much to the progression because we get another similar harmonic rhythm or variation on this same idea in the second phrase, and the middle chord doesn't really contribute too much. But here, coincidentally, 6 wants to go to 2. I'll leave that there for you to do with it what you will. We then have C, G, E, and E. That's C major in root position, that's a 4 chord. A little bit of adjacent harmony going on. Then we have A, C, C, and F sharp. That is F sharp diminished over A, which is 7-6. We then have G, D, G, and G, which is an interesting chord. It is a tonic triad, but no third. And as we get ready for our perfect authentic cadence in the key of G major, we have D, D, G, and A. So we know that a 5 chord's being implied here, but the G over the D is a 4-3 suspension that's ornamented here and resolves on this beat with the F sharp and the A before we get G major, G, D, D, and G, or sorry, G, B, D, and G. I always mix up bass clef and treble clef when I'm reading from the bottom to the top, but yeah, that's our root position tonic triad. And then we move to the second phrase, and this is a plagal cadence, or at least what I believe to be a plagal cadence, but unlike any plagal cadence we've seen in the chorales thus far. So G, B, D, and G, it's a G major triad. I also forgot to mention that it is in the key of D major, it seems. So I'm going to go ahead and not call this G major 4 per se, because it doesn't really sound like the modulation has happened yet, but on the next beat it sounds like the wheels are starting to turn. We have E, B, G, and G. In the key of G major, that's our E minor chord, but in the key of D major, it's our supertonic 2 chord. And then we have some passing tones, not in the inner voices this time, but the alto and the bass, before we go to C sharp, E, E, and A, which is A major over C sharp. It's a 5 chord, so we see 2 going to 5 here, which makes sense in first inversion more specifically. And then we have D, A, F sharp, and F sharp, which is D major in root position, which is now our tonic. We have some passing tones in the upper voices before we go to B, D, B, and A. Sorry, B, D, D, and A, which is really unusual because I guess this implies, well, it really can only imply something. It's a 5thless B minor 7 chord, which would not, it's no longer our 3 chord like it was here. It's our 6 chord now, and this time we have an added 7th, which we didn't have in the first iteration. So we're seeing the same chords just flip-flopped in terms of their relation to a different key. So here we're in G, here we're in D, we see B minor here, we see B minor here, and it's different context. But as we get ready for this plagal cadence, we go from 6 to E minor, E, B, E, and G. And then we go straight into D major, because this E, this G, if you just look at the tenor, it's just arpeggiating the E minor triad before we go straight to our tonic. 2 to 1. We don't see that all that often. 6 does want to go to 2, but we generally expect a dominant triad or some type of dominant functioning chord in between 2 and 1. But here we have 2 going to 1. It's very unusual. But I would call that a plagal cadence because it is a non-tonic, or it's a non-dominant chord resolving to the tonic. So typically it's 4. Here we have 2. They're effectively functioning the same way. So even though plagal cadence in the textbook might often tell you that 4 is the most common, here we have 2 going to 1. Okay, moving ahead, we have a half cadence in the key of G major, so we're looking for some point where we modulate. And I think similarly to the beginning of the second phrase, I don't think we modulate straight away. So we go from D major to B minor again, B, D, D, and F sharp. So that's our 6th chord. So we see this beginning of 1 going to 6 recurring. We've seen it in 3 of the 4 phrases now. And then we have E, D, E, and G, which is E minor 7 in root position, which is kind of interesting. That would just be a 2-7 chord here. 6 going to 2-7 like we would expect it to, or just 6 going to 2 in general. But I think this is where it starts to modulate to the key of G major. Similar positioning as we get in the the second phrase. Not the first phrase because we don't modulate, but in the second phrase. So I think that there is some symmetry here in terms of the modulation and how it corresponds with the form. But we're moving back to the key of G, and this is now 6-7, E minor being our pivot. We have a passing leading tone. It's sort of like a 4-6 chord going to a tonic chord in root position. So when we see 6 going to 1, we typically see the leading tone involved to connect the distance when it's going up, but not going down. Going down I haven't seen as much, but going up, that's typically where you see it. Okay, that goes to F sharp, C, A, and A, which is F sharp diminished in root position, which is very interesting. And I'm so sorry, this is not a tonic triad. Apologies, this is a C major triad over G, so almost like a tonic triad, but a bit of a deception because it's interesting having a deception coming from here. But we get G in the bass, but it goes to a tonic triad in second inversion, and this second inversion is not used in a way that the textbook would expose us to. However, 4 does go to 7, F sharp, C, A, and A in root position, which is relatively uncommon as well. If you look at this F sharp as not necessarily an accented non-chord tone, but rather part of a larger figure that consists of 2 beats where we have the Ds, I think it's also possible to analyze this as a 5-7 chord, right? D, C, A, and A, and D, F sharp, C, and A. We get the whole 5-7 chord here. They're effectively functioning the same way, but this wouldn't be a 5-7 chord, it'd be a 5-6-5. So sorry for that lapse in analysis there. But regardless, the dominant functioning chord goes to G major, G, B, D, and B in root position. So 4-7-1 or 4-5-1, dealer's choice. Then we go to D major, D, F sharp, D, and A, which is a 5 chord. Then we have a couple of passing tones before we get our tonic, before we get another 5 chord. See, this is another interesting cadence. We get 5, and then we get another 5. I was on autopilot and expecting our tonic here, but no, we have another 5 chord, which is unusual. We typically don't see 5 going to 5, especially over such a large swath of the harmonic rhythm, like 3 beats of the harmonic rhythm. But regardless, the last phrase is pretty tame and ends in a perfect authentic cadence in the key of the tonic, so no modulations here. But our 5 chord does throw us for a bit of a loop as it resolves to B minor, B, D, F sharp, and B, so a bit of a deceptive progression here. That goes to not E minor, but E, C, G, and C. A bit of a close relative to E minor, but it's C major over E, so we get the 3 going to 6 on the bass, but a different harmony on top. And then we get F sharp, A, D, and C, so we get a subdivision or a more granular look at the harmonic rhythm as opposed to beats 1 and 2 being one part of the harmonic rhythm, then beat 3 being the second part of the harmonic rhythm. We get 3 beats harmonized here. So this is F sharp, D7 over F sharp, which would be 5-6-5, which then goes to G major, G, G, D, and B. So normal progression so far. A little bit of adjacent harmony going on with these 3 beats as well, 3, 4, and 5. We then have F sharp, A, D, and A, which is another D major triad in first inversion, so that's 5, 6. That then gets turned to root position on beat 2. So 5, 3 will just change the figured bass. And then we go to G major, G, G, D, and B. Root position, tonic triad. We then have a D major chord, D, A, D, and A. So a bit of an interesting D major chord. It's third lis. We have a passing tone in the tenor, but we still know it's being implied. And then we get the 7th of the chords. We have D, A, D, and C, which is interesting. So no third in the chord, a third lis 7 chord. That resolves to G major, G, B, D, and G. Perfect authentic cadence. So for as plain of a chorale as this one is, as many of Bach's 3-4 time chorales are, has some pretty interesting quirks. You know, the 2-to-1 cadence probably being the hallmark of this chorale, the most interesting aspect. We have some very interesting voicings here, you know, lots of third lis triads, and interesting uses of B minor as well, I would say, are some takeaways from this chorale in particular. But regardless, it's pretty tame. Everything more or less functions the way that you would expect it to, but taking into account the fact that there are a couple of twists and turns lurking in the texture. Because if you listen to the chorale, it's pretty tame, right? It's pretty straightforward, but you go in there and you find some choices that are, I would say, on like the edges of Bach's harmonic norms, at least in his vocal writing. But I will leave the analysis at that. Thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you so much for continuing to support the channel. I really appreciate the fact that people are watching the videos and people are following me on this journey. It's been really awesome so far. We are 133 episodes in as of this episode, so we have hundreds of more videos scheduled for the future that I'm really excited to release and to spend time uncovering Bach's music during. So thank you so much again for watching the video. I'm looking forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.